Siyamak, thank you so much for joining us. Maybe to start, can you sort of lay out to the audience how California got to where it is today? How did it go from having Ronald Reagan as the governor to now being essentially a one-party state with Democrats in supermajority control?
Well, thank you, Roman, for having me. You know, the documentary that we made is actually sums all of this of how we went over the years to the direction we went. And we took a different approach on doing this documentary. We actually didn't look at the history of the politics. We went more from figuring out why people are leaving the state, and from there going into looking at what policies caused them to leave. Because most of the time, people leave the state because of housing costs, cost of living, and a lot of times people love the state. A lot of Californians love the state. They don't want to go, but they have to go because they can't afford to buy a home or the cost of living is so high. So from there, we went back to looking at what policies are causing the cost of living to be so high, the cost of housing to be so high. And we figured out there's a lot of policies that are causing this exodus. So essentially, we are doing this to ourselves. And Californians are very compassionate. You know, we want to help, and when we hear these policies, they sound really good on paper, so we vote for them. And this is what it's causing the exodus that you see. California going from the place where people would move in for the California dream, now unfortunately is becoming the place where people are moving out because there are better places out there.
So according to your research, what are maybe the top 3 or 5 policies that were enacted? They sounded good, but they in turn caused what California is now?
Well, Roman, there's hundreds of policies, and they pile up on each other. But I can give you some examples. So some of the things that we figured out is the housing costs are more than double here compared to the rest of the nation. And the California leaders, believe it or not, they talk about lowering the housing costs. And at the same time, they passed a law recently that mandates every new home to have solar panels, which will add $30,000 to $40,000 to the cost of each new home built. So there are other laws where there's a hidden tax on energy, on gasoline, like energy. Utility cost here is 34 cents per kilowatt hour compared to the rest of the nation at 14 cents, which is 1.5 times more. And there's hidden taxes on utilities. So what it does, it actually makes the average person pay a lot more. And the reason there are these hidden taxes on utility and energy is because California has these aggressive climate policies. We want to lead the world with our climate policies. And we are taxing, and the California state leaders are taxing the average resident to pay for those climate initiatives. So there is a lot of different laws that have piled up on each other over the years, and it's gotten to a point where it's very hard for average people to live here. And the other part of it is that the media has done a disservice to people by not really critically covering issues and telling the average Californian that the root cause of their problems are in these policies. That's why we made this documentary.
Where is that hidden tax money going? Because I can imagine if I'm living in California and I'm paying, let's say, double per kilowatt hour than the rest of the nation, but then, and that is largely due to taxes, but the money is going to something that I support, then I'm like, okay, maybe this is okay. But did you figure out where all these hidden tax money is going to? You said climate initiatives. What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so some of these climate initiatives, there is one place that there is a fund. For example, there's different funds that these go into to fund different climate initiatives. One of these funds is actually funding the bullet train. We have this project, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, the bullet train in California that's supposed to go from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And one day it's going to go from Bakersfield to Madera, which a lot of people don't know these locations. We're spending billions of dollars, and these billions of dollars on the bullet train, some of it is coming from these taxes that we are charging on utility and gas prices. There's other areas as well that these climate initiatives, they all have cost to us. And the money gets put aside for different projects, and we are paying for it while we may not see any results from them in our day-to-day life.
So besides taxes, what's the situation with crime in the major cities in California? Because you know, I'm of course watching the news like everybody else. I see these crazy situations with tent cities all throughout San Francisco and LA. When I was in LA last year, in the middle of last year, it just felt generally unsafe. You know, it really felt like everywhere you turn there was homeless people. I saw many people doing drugs on the street very openly. What is the root cause of that?
So there's a couple of things here, Roman. We have actually legalized theft in California. We passed a proposition 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, 2014. We actually said if you steal multiple times, and as long as it's under $950, you won't face a big punishment. You'll just get a ticket. So there are people out there in California that are going to stores with a calculator sometimes and calculating under $950, and they take the items and walk out. And so we have a lot of theft that we've legalized here. And in certain areas, like you mentioned LA, where we have a district attorney that's not really punishing crime, they're not really going after crime. Like we have relaxed the law so much. So for example, in LA, if you go and rob somebody, if you use a gun or you don't use the gun, the punishment is the same. So a lot of people are starting to take guns to these robberies. You brought up another point about homelessness. On the homeless front, we actually have, it's amazing our policies with homelessness. We have actually, wherever you see these homeless encampments, based on what we discovered, they're living with their own rules of laws. So essentially, gangs are controlling a lot of these homeless encampments. And drug dealers are taking advantage of mentally ill and homeless people and drug users and addicts. So gangs are controlling these communities. And in some cases, the homeless are, because of their drug needs, they're going into the stores and stealing things and coming back and selling those to buy drugs. So essentially, we've legalized theft and we've created this deviant society that people are living on the street. And at the same time, we're funding some nonprofits to build housing, which if I tell you the numbers and the cost of this housing, you will be shocked by that.
Mm-hmm. What are the numbers? I guess the two questions would be, what are the numbers and where's the money coming from?
So a lot of the money is coming from taxpayers. You know, we usually vote for these measures. You know, there is a measure in LA called Measure HHH. Los Angeles residents paid this tax to actually take care of the homeless. They raised $1.2 billion to fund 10,000 units for homeless. And each unit was supposed to be $120,000 for a studio unit. Today, the cost is $600,000 per unit, what they built. And they were supposed to build 10,000, they've only built 1,300. And so there is a huge disconnect between where the money comes, where the money goes, and how this money is spent. We are paying for it as Californians, as taxpayers, but then when the money is spent, it's going to housing instead of dealing with the drug addiction in the streets. And when it's spent on housing, it's spent at a significant amount higher than the market rates. So there's a level of corruption going on in this whole homeless nonprofit initiatives that are going on here in California.